Like, if every day you woke up and you knew exactly what you were going to do all day, like, what's the fun in that?
Hello, and welcome to the Schmidt List, the podcast for people dedicated to managing successful projects, developing impactful products, and building engaged teams. And now, here's your host, Kurt Schmidt.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 35. David Annis, the managing director and partner at Zeus Jones, joins me this week. Zeus Jones, if you don't know, is a brand innovation and design company, and Dave and I go way back. Today, we're going to be talking about innovation. What is innovation? Where does it come from? How does it happen? Can we all do it? I hope you enjoy the conversation. David and I cover a wide variety of subjects, but take a listen to the show and stick around afterwards for some special messages. Without further ado, here's my conversation with David. Dave, thanks for joining me today. Appreciate you showing up.
Of course.
Tell me about how did you get into design and advertising and all this crazy world?
Yeah, sure. I don't know how far back you want to go, but I can start probably. I was actually at the U, worked at the Daily, the Minnesota Daily, with a bunch of folks. And actually started out in ad production, so doing like designing the little goofy ads and promo spaces and things like that.
Yeah.
And then kind of realized at that time that there wasn't anybody doing anything cool with or at least making any money off the website. And so I was like, I wonder if we could create sort of a sales kit for our online. So I started researching like affiliate programs and banner spaces, and then I created a thing that was sort of like a thrifty hipster. I don't know if you remember that thing back in the day, but it was like bars, happy hour deals. And then just ran around trying to sell that stuff. And what was nice about it is I kind of made up my own commission levels because no one knew about what it would cost, how to price it. And so I did that. And that kind of gave me an in when an internship came up at Fallon, sort of in what they called at the time the interactive department at Fallon.
Right.
And so I got an internship there that was supposed to be a summer internship that lasted, I think, 11 months or something like that. And then I was in the interactive side working on a lot of stuff on like BMW, USA.com, and sort of a lot of the digital campaigns. And they decided I was somewhat useful for some reason, and so they created a position called operations manager, which didn't exist before they hired me, and I think it was just a way to get me in the door for cheap.
Yeah, sure.
No, but got there and then worked at Fallon. Sort of kind of worked my way up the ranks there to become an interactive producer, and made a lot of good connections, a lot of good friends within that agency. And
big agency. Yeah,
it was big. But they were doing some, amazing work and sort of really forward, thinking things. And but as we were working there, like I said, had really good mentors, and those mentors actually ended up leaving and starting Zeus Jones. And about as they were kind of heading out the door, I was like, hey, keep me in mind.
Right. I like working with you guys.
I like how you guys think. And shortly after they kind of got the business up and running, they sort of started out with this idea that they were going to be maybe more of like a strategy consultancy think tank kind of company. And that the clients were going to execute everything, because we had sort of had this philosophy, or we did early on, that we didn't want to compete for sort of existing, internal resources or existing partnerships or resources for production. Because that's sort of where things can get a little bit confrontational when you're trying to scoop up every bit of the work so that you can keep people busy and bill hours. So I think out of the gates, they were like, maybe we won't produce anything. Maybe we'll just rely on, existing partners. And then about 3 months into it or something, they're like, oh, we actually need to make stuff. So
people want a deliverable.
Yeah, exactly. So, they called me over. I think I was employee number one, followed very shortly thereafter by another one of our partners, Brad, heads up the design group. And that was 11 years ago.
Wow. So you really had to believe in those guys, because Fallon's big agency, and then you take off to jump to this smaller place.
Yeah.
What was the thinking behind that, or was there no thinking behind that?
No, maybe not enough thinking. No, it was good. Like I said, because I loved Fallon. Fallon was the agency I wanted. Like, I dreamed of working at when I was in high school.
Sure.
There was a guy that was actually at Duffy that came and presented at our high school AP art class and was like, "Hey, here's design." And I was like, "Hey, that's a job you can do." Like instead
you
of
get
just
paid for that,
right? Instead of just being a burnout art boy, you know, like, oh, I can do something with this. So, but I thought I was like, maybe 20, 30 years from now, I'll end up getting a job at Fallon when I've really proven myself. And I was just lucky enough through circumstances and connections to get in out of college.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. And I met, the founders of Zeus there. And, basically the difference was, I think, what those guys wanted to do, was about, more about creating sort of engagement and experiences with people, kind of instead of just using communication solely. How can we actually do things for and with people versus just saying things to them?
Right.
And the kind of little projects that we worked on together were always sort of like the last 10 minutes of a presentation, here's how we could think about the products or the services of that. And so when they went to basically start a company that focused on that last 10 minutes of the presentation, I was like, oh yeah, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And if I get a chance to work with the mentors that basically taught me how to think about this stuff, all the better.
Yeah.
And also I was young and didn't have kids and, I was like, why not? If I'm going to risk something, I might as well do it now.
This is the time to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've always kind of liked the idea of, having some autonomy and say in what I do. And I think that's sort of also a core sort of value of the folks there is this idea of being in charge of your own destiny and being able to make decisions. And what better way to do that in a little tiny 5-person company.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, let's fast forward. It's not a tiny 5-person company now.
Right.
How what's the size of Zeus now, and what and you have offices in up there. Well, what part of town is that?
So
actually?
it's on Eat Street in Minneapolis.
Eat Street.
Yeah. So
that's right.
Nicollet. Yeah. So we're 11 years old now.
Yeah.
And we're 50 people roughly. And with a cast of characters of freelancing contract that help us out, but so 50 folks.
And so when you started Zeus, I'm guessing you followed everything you knew from Fallon, right? The same type of structure, the same type of roles, and all those things, or did you toss it all out and say, we're going to try something new? Or how did that work? How did that evolution work? Because I know, like we've talked about before, Zeus isn't your typical agency structure, right?
Right. Yeah. No, we intentionally make things extremely hard on ourselves by not following tried and true ways of doing things. So, no, we actually looked at a lot of stuff that we thought, there was a ton of great stuff about how agencies operated, but there was also stuff that seemed sort of counterproductive to what we were trying to do. And a lot of that had to do with sort of roles and hierarchy and sort of centralization of power and decision making. And so what we did, instead of thinking about specific roles and different departments and things like that, I mean, we definitely have specific skills and sort of disciplines like strategy, design, creative production. But the structure is much more sort of the management structure or how the place operates. The operational structure is much more around jobs to be done versus specific roles. So, when we kind of started, we thought, not when we started, but once we got to a point where we actually started to feel like we needed some more structure and more leadership, honestly. We needed to distribute sort of decision-making power and that kind of thing. And actually just how the agency was going to evolve. We didn't want it to be just, in one person's head. We wanted it to come from kind of everywhere. So we thought about this idea that, well, ultimately we want to do amazing work, right? Really useful quality work that, because that's how we're going to grow through reputation and through relationships. Yeah. And so to get to that level of impact, that level of good work, we felt like we needed a few things. We needed really good people, that felt like they were evolving and growing, organized into really good teams, aligned with opportunities. And so we created an agency structure around that instead of disciplines. So we have what we call focus groups or focus teams that focus on like growth and culture of individuals, alchemy, which is about team alchemy and assignment. And then we have output that kind of keeps an eye on the quality of the work to make sure that we're constantly pushing ourselves to do better work. And then what we call like enterprise leads, which are kind of like sort of like account management to some degree.
Producer, account management.
Yeah, they're more like focused on like we're making sure that our clients are being taken care of, but also being exposed to the thinking we're doing across the agency and other places.
They're part of the actual team.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So that's what we did. And those groups are organized by people from every discipline.
Sure.
So, yeah.
But is it difficult when a client maybe shows up and says, where's my fancy creative director?
Yep.
That's going to lead my charge that's jumped from 6 New York agencies and landed here?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was a challenge early on when you kind of had this. Certain clients are like, hey, they want to go, top to top, right? And they're like, where's my executive creative director or whatever?
Yep.
And honestly, we kind of handle that in a couple ways. One, we try to get over that sort of that idea by talking about sort of the way that we work. It's really collaborative, and the ideas come from everywhere, and all that kind of stuff. But also, ultimately, if that doesn't, if that sort of justification or explanation doesn't work, and someone just wants like, I need my executive creative director with 20 agency background.
Right.
They're probably just not a great fit.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's because we work so collaboratively with our clients. Mm-hmm. We don't just sort of take a brief, go off, produce amazing stuff, and then come and go, here you go. That everyone needs to be really intimately involved in the work. So,
yeah. Well, I had Tim Brunel on the show a while back, and we talked a bit about the difference between the Mad Men era and then today's era, and he was very much on the side that you're talking about, which is this more autonomous, collaborative agency versus this top-down sort of this copywriter and art director go in a room and then magically come out and say, all right, everybody, now you've got what you're going to do for the next 6 months.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, the kind of problems that we're working on, I think that does work pretty well for like communications problems or like mass media, like TV ad campaign work. Developing a really strong creative idea like that with a group of 20, that's pretty challenging.
Yeah.
You do need, I think, someone that sort of has a vision for the creative expression. But when you're solving problems that are broader than that or sort of just different than that, like if you're trying to figure out like, what's our belief and purpose, and how do we apply that, and what are sort of the experiences that we want to create, and how do those apply to every single touch point across our ecosystem? Right. That requires a lot of working together and bringing the client in and working like on the same team. We talk a lot at Zeus about being on the same side of the table as our client, because do you think that's how we'll never? It's pretty hard for us to learn as much about someone's business as they know about their business, because they're in it day to day.
Yeah.
So it feels a little presumptuous to be like, oh yeah, we'll go figure it out and tell you about your company.
Wow me.
Yeah, exactly. And then, kind of get the thumbs up, thumbs down. Did we succeed? Presentation. I just felt uncomfortable and not productive. So yeah, it's about bringing in, everyone to the table, defining the sort of jobs to be done, sort of regardless of role, and then working on it together. Yeah, that's kind of the approach.
So let's say though you're obviously growing over these years, and you're bringing people on, and I'm guessing they're coming from sometimes traditional agencies. Is it hard to get them to unlearn that sort of aspect when they show up? Like they're very talented, and you're like, yeah, I got this person who's going to be great. She's going to just kill it, and then she comes in and she's kind of like, I'm waiting for direction. Has that been difficult to kind of hire the right people that fit in that model? Yeah,
hiring is it's tough for sure. There's always a risk of hiring someone that's got sort of too much ingrained sort of process or how they sort of think. But you also want to balance the idea of not creating just a monoculture where everyone thinks the same way we already do, because then we don't evolve. So you have to find that kind of balance. And we've had success and failures on everything from really junior to super senior. Sure. But I think what usually seems best is to find somebody that has a lot of sort of untapped potential or a lot of interest in doing something new. But maybe they're in an organization that either isn't ready for that kind of thinking, or their kind of the structure sort of limits their ability to make that kind of impact. And then bring them into Zeus, where there isn't much of a structure at all, and the ask it isn't just okay for anyone to have ideas outside of their discipline. It's actually sort of expected. And those are the kind of people that thrive, that are just like, I want to do something new. I want to have a lot of sort of ownership over that. And I'm willing to sort of try new things. In fact, the trying new things and experiment